If you feel like life has quietly become more expensive, more stressful, and harder to manage over the last few years, you are not imagining it. Rent is higher. Groceries cost more. Energy bills feel absurd. Even people with stable jobs and degrees feel like they are constantly catching up instead of moving forward. What makes this confusing is that most people did not suddenly become irresponsible. They did not stop working hard. They did not suddenly forget how to budget. Yet the pressure keeps increasing. For decades, the promise was clear and simple. Go to school, get qualifications, work hard, save money, and over time, life becomes more stable. This was not just advice passed down by parents. It was backed by reality. From roughly the 1950s through the early 2000s, wages generally increased alongside productivity. Housing took up a smaller portion of income. One salary could realistically support a household. In countries like the UK, the US, and much of Europe, each generation expected to live better than the one before it. That expectation is now broken, and the reason is not cultural or personal. It is structural, and the shift can be traced back to a very specific period. In 2008, the global financial system nearly collapsed. Banks had taken enormous risks, issuing loans to people who could not realistically repay them. Those loans were packaged, sold, and multiplied into complex financial products. When the underlying loans began to fail, the entire structure started to fall apart. Governments faced a choice: allow major banks to fail and risk a total financial collapse, or intervene. They intervened. In the UK, banks such as Royal Bank of Scotland were effectively rescued by the government. In the United States and Europe, trillions were injected into financial systems. This was described as a temporary emergency response. But what most people do not realize is that the system never returned to how it worked before. To prevent another collapse, central banks made borrowing extremely cheap. Interest rates were pushed close to zero for years. In some countries, they even went negative. This had immediate consequences. Loans became easier to access. Asset prices surged. Debt exploded. If you already owned assets, such as property or stocks, you benefited enormously. If you did not, you were left behind. Housing is the clearest example. In the UK and the US, house prices rose far faster than wages. Homes did not suddenly become better or larger. They became more expensive because cheap money flooded into property markets. Buyers were no longer competing only with other people. They were competing with debt, leverage, and investors who could borrow vast amounts at minimal cost. At the same time, saving money quietly stopped working. For generations, saving was considered responsible behavior. After 2008, with interest rates near zero, savings accounts paid almost nothing. Inflation slowly eroded purchasing power. Cash lost value without people noticing it day to day. Those who saved carefully were punished. Those who borrowed aggressively were rewarded. This was not accidental. Governments needed spending, borrowing, and investment to keep economies growing. Then came 2020. When COVID hit, the system was already fragile. Lockdowns shut down global economies almost overnight. Governments responded with measures never seen before. Massive stimulus programs were introduced. In the US, trillions of dollars were created and distributed. In the UK, furlough schemes paid wages directly. Across the world, money supply expanded at historic rates. At first, it felt necessary, even supportive. But money does not appear without consequences. By 2021 and 2022, Those consequences became impossible to ignore. Inflation surged. Food prices rose sharply. Fuel prices spiked. Rent followed. Inflation is not mysterious. It happens when more money chases the same amount of goods and services. Central banks then faced a dilemma. If they did nothing, inflation would spiral. If they raised interest rates, debt-heavy economies would come under strain. They chose to raise rates, and they did so rapidly. Higher interest rates hit ordinary people first. Mortgages became more expensive. Credit card debt grew heavier. Businesses slowed hiring or cut costs. Rents increased as landlords passed on higher financing costs. Meanwhile, large institutions often had tools to hedge risk or restructure debt. This is why young people struggle to buy homes. Middle earners feel permanently squeezed, and even good salaries no longer feel secure. This is not lifestyle inflation. It is systemic pressure. If this sounds exaggerated, real-world examples show the same mechanics in more extreme form. In Argentina, repeated inflation crises destroyed savings. In Turkey, currency devaluation wiped out purchasing power. In Venezuela, money itself became nearly meaningless. These countries did not collapse because people stopped working. They collapsed because monetary systems broke trust. What makes this so psychologically damaging is how personal it feels. People were taught that effort leads to reward. So when effort stops producing stability, they internalize the failure. They think they made the wrong choices, fell behind, or did something incorrectly. But millions of people experiencing the same pressure at the same time is not coincidence. It is structure. The modern economic system is built on debt. Governments run deficits. Corporations refinance constantly. Growth is required just to maintain stability. This means inflation is not an accident. Asset appreciation is not optional. Cash becomes risky. Stability becomes temporary. Rules change not because of conspiracy, but because mathematics demands it. Understanding this is not about panic or pessimism. It is about clarity. People who navigate economic shifts successfully tend to do three things. They understand how money actually works, not how it used to work. They do not blindly trust old rules that no longer apply. And they adapt earlier than most. If life feels harder than it should, if you did what you were told and still feel behind, you are not broken. The environment changed. Systems do not announce when they change. They let people discover it slowly, through pressure. The people who understand this do not magically become rich, but they stop blaming themselves. And that is where real control begins.